could be strong effects. That was estimated by these sources. However, other sources have stated something else. So they say the effect is there, but ignorable. There's some conflict of interest, maybe. And others have separated different sources and saying aggregating management, for example, has larger effects than aggregating soil or weather data. So they separated different aggregation effects. You know. So far, there's no consistent method of quantifying this effect. In the presentation before, we have seen the effect on the mean for one region. If you want to generalize it, we can dig a little deeper. We need a method to quantify the effect. So the research questions are still quite similar. How to quantify the effect, of course. What is the magnitude of the data aggregation effect for the weather data and simulated outputs? How do they vary with the models? There's some action model data, and how do they vary with the response variables of the production system and crops? So this concerns the same study presented already. I just was through the methods very roughly. We have 13 models running on different aggregation levels of climate data for North Rhine-Westphalia, for potential water-limited and nutrient-limited production situations. And this was done for maize, silage maize, and the winter wheat. So the method established here takes over the concept of the root mean square error. Again, we have two grids, one aggregated and one on a high resolution. And we can dissolve this aggregated grid again to its components at the higher resolution. You see, and you will fill out this high result grid again with 8 from the fourth resolution. And if we now look at how these two differ, we have these differences, 8 minus 5 is 3, and the root mean square error that can be calculated for these two grids then. And there we get quantification of the changes between the aggregation levels. So this is done for each pixel, or run over all pixels separately. And first, showing you what happens with the weather data. You can see here the precipitation on the 5 aggregation levels, from 1 kilometer up to 100 kilometer resolution, and the distributions according to these. And again, we see that the different absolute levels are dragged down to the fourth resolution, but the spread distribution narrows down again. So this is what we have observed before as well. And if we now calculate this root mean square error, we get these characteristic figures. You can see there's not much of a difference between 1 kilometer and 10 kilometer resolution in precipitation. You imagine it rains today here. What's the probability that it rains also 10 kilometers more away? But if you go then to the mountainous area, 100 kilometers away, of course the difference increase, and you see that there is a spread of minus 400 to up to plus 400 millimeters. Okay. And if we plot these as functions, we can characterize in this case for the weather data, in red the temperatures, minimum maximum temperature, on the right hand in blue the precipitation. And again, what we just said, there is, for example, the precipitation, there is almost no change at 10 kilometers, but it increases continuously up to 120 millimeters. So what happens then with the yield? We also get these patterns. That's the question. Here you have the three production situations. In the upper row, the potential one, in the middle one, water limited, and in the bottom one, nutrient or nitrogen limited row. And you see that the upper edge of the yield, 8.5 tons, drops up to 7.5 tons, like by 1 ton, and the lower edge drops about 2 tons from around 7 to about 5 tons. But we have similar spatial pattern. Now, this is the mean over the 30 years we have simulated. If we look now at the standard deviation over those 30 years, you get these patterns. Usually, you would have a a high variation with higher yield, maybe. In this case, it's the other way around. Here's low yield, and we have the high variation because we run into the limitation of the growth. So this is also very typical. If you have applied stress, you get a higher variation. And then, if we now calculate the root mean square error, we get this characteristic patterns. You see the shape of the curves, in this case for yield and winter wheat, for each model. The patterns are quite similar, although on different levels, absolute levels, and of course they have different, varying slopes. And you can make these characteristic curves for crops we have done, and for yield, evapotranspiration, and water use efficiency. You can see that the root mean square error in this case increases again with the aggregation level. And if we separate the effects or aggregate differently, like separating it into the production situations, you can see that the three production situations don't differ that much. The box plots are almost on the same level. And therefore, I'd like to conclude already that a simple method here in this case was presented just to give a number or maybe a curve on the deviation from the highest resolution, and simulated results significantly differ between or across the models. We've seen characteristic response curves for the models, and of course we have a high deviation with high aggregation, and the protein production system slightly influence the aggregation effect. That's basically it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you for your concise presentation. And any questions?
I don't know what is the scope of your work, but what do you think about if you want to use this kind of data aggregation for future climate projections? Because if you use, for example, not disaggregated data, data for a station, and then when you aggregate them, you lose some of these peaks, for example. And when you want to use this weather generator, and then in the for example, something more heat stress or extreme event of rain, and this kind of aggregation may affect this severe or this higher extent events. But are you planning? I mean, also in your, are you going to do kind of thing for the future climate? How do you think this will affect our modeling of other climate change?
Well, we are going to do this also for future projections, but the mechanism itself will not change, of course. Now, if we have a spread or a climate change ensemble and we do some other aggregations on it, we will observe these effects on a different range, of course. It will come up maybe in a year or so more. Yes, in the plan for sure. But we need some more detailed look and how to quantify these things and transfer it.
Thank you. More questions? Well, I have the question or a comment. When you compare the results of this data aggregation for potential and water limited crop simulation, differs not only the data aggregation on precipitation, but also on soil, because in water limited simulations the crop, the soil is going to have more influence in the crop simulation. So I think it's difficult to separate the effect of precipitation aggregation and soil aggregation in this case.
Well, maybe not, because we have done this only for climate data, and this was one representative soil for the whole region. Now in the second phase, we aggregated 300 meter resolution soil data for all these 5 levels, and we're going to do the opposite. We do one climate and all the soil, and then we do the interaction. Are you coupled? all levels of interaction. But this will be like many more million runs.
Anything else? So thank you. And we move to the next speaker that we have from Karlsruhe Institute of Technology, Germany. And this is going to speak about parameter-induced uncertainty quantification of regional MTO and on the inventory using the biochemical model and scale.
Thank you very much. So I changed the title of the presentation slightly because I'm not only talking about parameter-induced uncertainty, I'm also talking about like input data-induced uncertainty, and on the regional scale, we are going to make an intercomparison about these two uncertainties, which is going to be more of higher importance. So the overview, I'm just like giving a short overview about the model we are using. This is Landscape DNSC, and about how to compile regional inventory simulations. I'm just like talking a little bit about parameter uncertainty, input data uncertainty, and then we'll look into the results. So I'm just starting this with this saying that everybody believes in measurement data except the person who won the measurements. In modeling, it's actually the opposite. So the model developer believes in his model, but the audience usually doubts all these results. And this is because usually the modeling, it actually gives you a number. It gives you a result, and it doesn't really assign an uncertainty to this. And with this talk, I'm trying to clarify this a little bit. So, like Landscape DNSC is a model which is derived from the family of DNSC models. So there's agricultural DNSC, there's forest DNSC, and there's some other versions, and they went all apart from each other, having different process descriptions. So we homogenized this into one model, which has one general biogeochemistry process description for all these kind of ecosystems. It's a site or scale model, and it's designed in such a way that you can deploy it on a high-performance computing system. So this exercise is including a compilation of a regional inventory. So a regional inventory, usually you have to somehow, you have a domain of interest, you have to decompose it into units, which you assume homogeneous conditions. So this can be due to like climate input data, like land use, like management data, what you have, and soil properties. And somehow you have to define one common grid system. And this is usually done by expert knowledge, either on, most of the time it's done due to the availability of the scale of this input data. So with all of this, you will compile a regional input data set, and then you can just like run the regional inventory. So what is parameter uncertainty? So we are talking about process-based models. So they include a big amount of processes. They are running on different scales. They have different process details, and all these processes need to have like data on special parameters which are fundamental to them. So this leads to the problem that sometimes for some applications you have like a parameterization or an over-parameterization of the fundamental processes, because these processes are data hungry. So if you want to simulate like mineralization or nitrification, denitrification processes, you need to have actually really good quality of input data in order to get the microbial turnover right. So with this big set of parameters, you will face the problem that these parameters are measured somewhere and are calibrated for some ecosystems, but you're going to transfer this to other ecosystems So there's some uncertainty assigned to these parameters, and this is going to propagate into model results. So if the input data on the regional scale especially is the same, as said before, we have like climate input data, we have land use, we have management data somehow, and you have like soil physical properties. And usually for an inventory, these properties are, some of them are on a high resolution, others are rather on low resolution, but somehow you have to get them together and you have to decompose the domain of interest into width or polygons, and you have to assume homogeneous conditions. So there's always an uncertainty assigned to this input data. And usually the problem is that the quality of the input data itself has an uncertainty assigned, because this input data is not actually specially observed or derived for like modeling purposes. They come from different sources and they are not really mapping together. So this is like assigned an input uncertainty. And if you combine this, so that means what we have done is we performed first for the parameter uncertainty a Bayesian calibration for these systems for a few of our observation sites. So this is a Markov chain method. You run the model like 400,000 times. You produce a parameter distribution. We have sampled out of this parameter distribution 400 parameter distribution sets, and run for each of them a regional inventory. And then you stack them on top of each other and do a statistical analysis. For the input uncertainty, we just selected 4 input parameters and sampled them, and this was resulting into like 625 input data sets, for like each of them having an individual setup, and you run 625 regional input, regional inventories. You do the same, you stack them up, and you do a statistical analysis. And then you will see, if you just compare both of them, you will realize, in this case, we run inventory for 3 years. This is like one crop rotation of 3 different crops. And you just like have to have a look at, so this analysis is like the median, like this viscous plots are comparing the 400 regional inventories for the parameter-induced uncertainty versus the 625 regional inventories for the input data-induced uncertainty. And this is for N2O. For N2O, surprisingly, we thought that the model is more sensitive to variations in input data. And we got the result that the parameter-induced uncertainty here gives us a higher uncertainty than the input-induced uncertainty. If you look at the diurnal pattern of this, so you see that like this is like the red is between the 25 and the 75 quartile, and there's the median in between. You see the variation, how both of these will vary. And if you make just a histogram, you have to see that there's 2 different scales. So in which range most of the simulation will give a total number. So this is the total number of nitrogen as N2O emissions which come out of this inventory for this area. So the area was having 5,000 polygons. It's like the whole state of Germany. If we go further and do the same thing for an analysis for nitrate leaching, we get more or less the opposite result. So here for nitrate leaching, it seems that the input-induced uncertainty is a lot higher, because this is due to the fact that we use some hydraulic parameters in the variation of the input, which might cause some different kind of hydrological regime. That means we'll most likely produce more like percolation or more leaching, and therefore we get higher leaching rates, which is like what we think to interpret the data. So the same, the parameter-induced uncertainty here is having a different distribution as the input-induced uncertainty. And just to make a conclusion about this work, In the moment that it seems that for N2O, the parameter-induced uncertainty is bigger than the input-induced uncertainty, but for N2O, for nitrate leaching, seems to be the opposite. What we want to do actually is to assess the overall uncertainty of such an inventory. So that means we will actually do a combination of the parameter-induced uncertainty and the input-induced uncertainty, but this is like multiplying the model simulations. What we do, and you have to realize this is not only single model ones, this is like regional inventory model ones. So we are feeding here a big HPC computer system with like a lot of load, which works with which takes like a long time. And what we also want to do is like to extend the whole exercise and to introduce like ensemble studies to assess the model-induced uncertainty together with this as well, to assess the overall uncertainty of regional inventories. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you for your presentation. So we have time for questions. No? Nobody? Well, maybe we are going to make the following presentation. And it's quite related to this one. So maybe let's have today. Yeah. So we're going to continue with the presentation on the responses of soil to emissions and nitrate leaching on climate index data aggregation via the chemistry model sample study.
So I'm giving this presentation on behalf of Steffen Klatt, which is one of my PhD students, but he could not be here today. So this is just wrapping up some of the presentations we have seen before from Holger. So this is also some results of the scaling exercise we have been performing within Maxur, which is still ongoing. So this is just a few of the results, because the scaling exercise we have seen that it includes actually yield simulations, it includes simulations of the water cycle, but as well of the carbon and the nitrogen cycle on the regional scale. So this is like just trying to collect a few of the data which is available already with respect to the nitrogen cycle. So I'm just like wrapping up a little bit or summarizing the fundamental approach we use for this, the scaling effect on the nitrogen cycle, some results, and what we're planning to do. So again, here we are talking about a regional inventory. So one of the questions was why we do this. I mean, in principle, you have to see if you do a regional inventory, you want to simulate a regional inventory for a domain of interest. Somehow you have to define it into like grid cells or polygons. And this is something which you have to do in advance in order to simulate the system in each of these grid cells or polygons. But you have to decide what is the size, because the model assumes in each of these grid cells homogeneous conditions. So therefore, you have a motivation on how to do this. Either you do this like because the data is given, or the data is available, but usually the data comes from different sources. So you have climate data, you have soil data, you have land use data, you have management data. They come from different sources, and therefore they are most likely to be on different scales. So somehow you have to aggregate, you have to define one scale, and then you have to aggregate the data. So this is the motivation why we do this. For the study, we have selected what Holger already presented. We run regional inventories for N2O and NO3. So in principle, all the models which are performing these yield simulations, so some of them are also simulating more carbon cycling in the soil and to like give some results for the carbon cycling. And some of them even include nitrogen cycling, have some results for nitrogen cycling, which I'm going to present. So just to sum up for the, I'm agricultural management, you have to see that we do maize monoculture rotation or wheat monoculture rotation. And for maize, we have for all of 30 years about 230 kilograms of nitrogen input. And for the wheat monoculture rotation, we have a little bit less. So you've seen these pictures before, so this is just like to compare the different scales. So if you run the simulations on the big 100 kilometer resolution, this will result in 9 grid cells. The finer you get, you will end up in an inventory which you perform, or which you have to simulate based on 34,000 grid cells. So from the computing point of view, this is a big effort actually, because if you don't have the computer facilities to perform such an inventory, you'll have to decide on which scale you're going to work. It's not only the data, because we want to actually be able to simulate this in a short time that we can actually have a look at the results. So therefore, somehow you have to solve the question on which scale you're going to simulate your inventory. So this is just a summary of all of the models which are involved in the moment and which are which have declared that they will actually supply data. Not all of these models, or only a few of them, have submitted their simulation results, and we are just like have aggregated a few of these results just to show you the first, just to summarize a few of these results. If we look, for example, now at the N2O emissions, the yearly N2O emissions and the uncertainty range, you'll see that for the 10 kilometer resolution, we only have received up to now from four model simulations results. Some of the models have submitted results, but maybe they have been, we have not been able to process them, or the results had some bad data in it, so the whole statistical analysis didn't work on them. So we've been able to process this for simulations. It's the Epson model, the Stiglitz model, and the landscape DNC model. And you see that the results actually are rather similar. This is from the scaling point of view, but they vary quite a lot between the models. And this is this is fundamental because the nitrogen cycle is at the end of all the processes. So the nitrogen cycle is reacting very sensitive to all the changes what is between the models. So the drivers which are responsible in the end for the N2O emissions of the nitrate leaching there are many drivers, and all variations will result actually in strong differences in model results. If we just have a look at spatial variability, we'll see that the models do not really give us an homogeneous picture of how they work. Even here are different scales in all of these plots. It's not only the scales, it's just the fact that between like the Epson or the Stiglitz model, we have complete opposite results. So in one of the models, it's more likely that hydraulic processes are the major driver for the N2O emissions, like in areas where you have more precipitation and less temperature, whereas in other models, it's rather the temperature that drives the dynamics of the N cycle and giving us higher N2O emissions in other areas. If we go to the nitrate leaching, we get somehow the same picture if we compare the scales. So from 1 kilometer to 10 kilometer resolution, the model themselves, the variability is not that big between the ensemble, but within the ensemble, the results are actually quite big because one has to see the scales they go up. So this is like 500 kilograms of nitrate leaching. So there's a big difference in the dynamics in between the in the comparison of the models. And if we go to the spatial patterns, here for nitrate leaching, we have like more models which have delivered already data. We see that some of the models, they behave completely the opposite on the spatial scale with the results. So in the moment we are about to analyze this, what are the reasons for this? Because of the, as a conclusion, because of the, as the nitrogen cycling in the models is really highly complicated and the drivers itself are different in each of the models. We are not only looking at the variability of the scale and of the ensembles, but also we try to evaluate and compare the drivers for the flow emissions and for the leaching, especially like the soil water content, the percolation. We going to assess the nitrogen balance for all of the models and for all of the simulation runs to see if we are really actually having the nitrogen balance close. The next thing which we want to see is as the nitrogen, the end flow emissions and the leaching is actually a nonlinear result to the climate conditions like the aerobic situation of the soil, for example. We are going to actually redo most likely all of the simulations and aggregate daily instead of yearly results and just have a look at the response of all the models for certain areas due to like the temporal evolution of the drivers. And in the end, the exercise will somehow help us to define a measure of a correlation of like climate variability or subscale variability. It's not only for climate. We extend this exercise later on variability on soil properties as well. Actually help us to identify the optimal resolution for your objective, what you want to do when you're going to do a regional inventory. So I would like to thank especially Laura Bonn, who actually worked an effort into this and helped us with aggregation and collecting of the data and supplying of the data. And thank you.
Thank you, Eva. We will cover the time with your presentation, so we have time for a little discussion now. So, questions? No? So, actually, for me was a very nice example, this accumulation of uncertainties at the end of the process. And it's quite relevant with this time here, because out here, because we are, at least for us, we are facing the same problems in our website, in IFRS1. And I was wondering, how are you going to manage this huge variability? For instance, when you have two models projecting different opposite effects, are you planning a way of evaluating maybe with the baseline, with the observations, which model could be more reliable? And are you going to develop a system for weighting or for evaluating the model within your ensemble? That's a difficult question, but I think it's really relevant.
I think, of course, it's relevant, but this is not the objective of our work, neither in the scaling exercise nor for me as a modeler. So, in principle, everybody is trying to advance and get this model as good as possible. So, one has to see that the models are, that there's models which are really like highly detailed and really process and data hungry. So the question to answer which is the best model to evaluate this is always depending on the objective which we're going to go for and what data is available for what purpose you're going to use it. In principle, the motivation for doing this uncertainty exercise is also to address the issue that for reporting all of these results, you need to assign somehow an uncertainty to it. And The uncertainty is related, as we've seen, to the parameters, but the parameter space for uncertainty is also related to the amount of calibration you put in. So if you run these Bayesian calibrations, the more sites for calibrating you put in, the better your parameter distribution, or say the most representative this parameter distribution will be. So therefore, you have to calibrate this. This is the Markov chain process, which is really long-term, long-going. So from that point of view, the conclusion should be that we run this as an ensemble exercise for all of the models, and then see how they will actually perform. But unfortunately, you need so much computing time that not all of the groups are actually capable to do this. But to answer your question, somehow on the regional scale, we need to do this exercise as an to address actually the model-induced uncertainty as well.
Yeah. And anyone wants to say that? Because, well, actually, I'm not talking about, I'm not discussing the use of ensembles, of course, but when for our exercise that was evaluating models work, was not in our in the beginning, but we crashed with that, and with huge variability, so we have to make decisions and anyhow to deal with the problem once we find it. And well, when I'm asking because we are now trying to figure out how to manage this huge variability, and so all solutions are welcome.
Just another comment, I mean, as a model developer, you know what the model is doing. You know all the processes, because somehow you have, like,
Only your model.
Yeah, it's your model. But when you interact with the model user community, it's a little bit different, because there's a lot of people, they have to use the model, they want to use the model, and they do not have this deep insight into all this process. So it's also there, for the Global Research Alliance, they have performed a blind test now. So that means that they have been given some data and everybody has to submit some results without knowing anything about the system. So if you have only very few data available, the model the difference will actually become really big. And this is also because you will have, for evaluation, you will see that there's a lot of nice simulation results, because they are, but they are made by experts. So you never know what they do actually. If they just apply the model and manipulate, I'm not saying manipulate, but optimize the input data, or if they actually optimize the model itself, fits the data. So this is always a difficult thing, especially if you go then into projection, because then you need to have a calibrated model, more or less, which is difficult.
Yeah, of course. Actually, we were passing a questionnaire to ask for information for individual model for this purpose. So, anyone else? So thank you very much. And we finished today with our last presentation by Federico Spana from the University of Torino. And he's going to talk about the case study of Banjar, physiological and biophysical modeling, plus the growth and productivity of Banjar in northwest Italy.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Federico Spanna. I'm an agrometeorologist and I work for public administration, Regione Piemonte, and also for University of Turin. I want to present you this case study that is a particular case study for mature, I think, because it deals not with annual crops, but perennial shrub, perennial trees. And this is, I think, a frontier, a challenge, because modeling the behavior of perennial trees is not so easy, and it's not so developed in this moment. We are working on vineyards because we are in the northwest Italy, and northwest Italy, in the Regione Piemonte, wine growers, wine production is a production very important for our agriculture. So some years ago we started to this activity, this project, this integrated project with several projects regarding dealing with the grape in order to study the behavior and in relation in particular not so much with the yield quantity but with quality of mass, quality of the productions that influence the final product that is wine. You understand that there is a high variability of yield quality in relation to meteorological conditions. So we adopted a multidisciplinary approach to study the grapevine agro-ecosystem, and we try to analyze biotic and also abiotic factors able to influence yield and in particular quality of wine. So we are trying to develop the main aim is to develop instruments of knowledge for vineyard management and wine quality improvement. So we are carried on several projects, but not so many because money there is a great lack of money. But we try to put all together from meteorologists, physiologists, physicists, and also entomologists, phytopathologists, chemicals, and also involve wine producers and wine companies. So this project, this integrated project, has several phases. The main phases main stages are field experimental activity, and now we are trying to use this activity, this data, field data, for applied numerical modeling. The integrated project wants to arrive to produce a decision support system platform in which we can we can consider, I don't know if there is the arrow, one, yes, meteorological data, phenological informations, ecophysiological information with photosynthesis, respiration, and so on, quality analysis of grape, of musts, and micrometeorological information. We try to put all together in a historical database, and now we are trying to process all this information and applying numerical modeling, applying and parameterize numerical modeling. Here you have an image of the historical database in which we put all together this information, and we elaborate also bioclimatic information and must quality and product information. This doesn't work very well. So we have also a GIS component to make spatialization of the information. So, what do we want to do, and what do producers expect to us? They want information. They want to understand how is going what is the trend of the vegetative period, and so they want information on real-time information on mobile devices to use in their in the field and their activities. So wine growers and advisors can choose the best practices for the vineyard management in relation to the condition, ecophysiological and climatic conditions. The steps of this integrated project is, as we see, realization of an historical database with climatic, bioclimatic data, ecophysiological information, grape quality and productivity. So we have also, we are carried on field experimental activities, and in this case, we are trying to evaluate different models, different approaches with calibration, future calibration and application. So we have carried out two approaches, a biophysical approach and an ecophysiological approach in modeling. So we, from 2008 on, we are carried on several vineyards. This is Piedmont, this is Northwest Italy, in several locations, and on several varieties of vine, Nebbiolo, Barbera, and so on. We are carried on continuously monitoring systems of temperature, photosyntheticality, radiation, wind speed, soil temperature, and radiation, and so on. Where we are collecting also physiological variables with like dry matter and point gaseous exchanges, DFA index, and at the end we evaluate also grade quality parameters. These are instrumental supports like this for measure of light, infrared gas exchange, temperature and moisture of the soil, and so on, also PAR and so on. We also installed ultrasonic anemometer in some vineyards, and we are trying to calibrate also this information, this data on our hilly areas that are complex landscape in which we can see our vineyard, our vines, and it's a very complicated territory. So we have in parallel meteorological information and at the moment sonic anemometer. The database, I think that is a very important instrument because we can collect the past, all the past about climatological information and in particular quality information for our vines. The historical data set collect also bioclimatic indices and the grade qualities indices like total acidity, titratable acidity, pH, total soluble solid, and other important information like anthocyanins, that is important quality parameters for our red wines and white wines. What are we trying to do now? We try to make an approach with the ecophysiological approach in order to quantify the photosynthesis, respiration, and ecophysiological characteristics of our wines. So the approach, you perhaps know very well this kind of approach, but not so many people knows how to apply this on perennial trees and shrubs. So we are trying to apply the Farquhar approach. So I don't know, there are several approaches. In any case, also the approach is classical with radiation use efficiency and transpiration and other models. We are trying to apply these approaches in order to quantify the net primary productivity. Some results. We have several informations, and we try to, in the first case, we are trying to correlate in a multiregressive approach with the empirical approach, not mechanistic approach, the information about assimilation, the information about wine quality, must quality, with the other vegetative parameters like lye, like leaf array index, and assimilation. We also carry on some important field activity about assimilation and stomatal conductance and the stem water potential in order to correlate this the productivity with the hydrical content of the soil. this is a first result of our empirical approach with a multi-regressive method. We compare the final quality of grapes with the simulated approach, and we obtained quite good results with this empirical approach. We would like to pass through a mechanicistic approach. These are curves of measured and estimated simulated comparison with the masked quality. You see the curves that are the simulated approach that fit quite well the observed measures. Biophysical approach. This is perhaps the central topic of FormaSure, because this is a physical approach with the University of Physics with sonic anemometer. The complication of Healy vineyards with the ultrasonic approach is evident because normally turbulence sensible heat flux from sonic anemometer are evaluated with the implied hypothesis of homogeneous, uniform, and horizontal plane. This is not our case, so we have to try to correct this situation. Then we use physicians use this Utopia model that is pointed out by University of Torino. It's a soil vegetation atmosphere transfer, and at first physicians use vegetation classes, specific vegetation classes that are not good for studies at local level. These are perhaps good for regional level, for national levels, but not so good. So we try to parameterize these vegetation classes with the field information. The model provides a relative balance with quantifying fluxes, latent heat flux, sensible heat flux, soil heat flux, and photosynthesis, also, or net radiation to obtain the photosynthesis. Meteorological data from this anemometer, meteorological data, I'm going to finish, and also information about vegetation cover, height, and leaf area index. This is a simulation of Utopia of energy balance, in which we can consider, we can show the trends of net radiation, the data of net radiation, latent flux, sensible flux, and so on. The simulation, you can see the blue curves that are the curves considering not the vineyards, but the class of vegetation, the more similar class of vegetation, and the green curves are instead the curves that simulate the real vegetation cover, leaf area in the development of grape. Utopia and can run. We can we have already find some comparison between Utopia and measurements. The regression values are quite good, but we are going on to improve this measurements. We also are using drones for mapping the NDVI maps of our vineyards. In conclusion, the work is still in progress, and the study involves 2-3 complementary projects. The results are interesting, considering an integrated approach with agrometeorological, ecophysiological, physical, and so the microbiome aspect. With FormaSure, we have the opportunity to involve in the working group other European countries, other models, and other data set of other wine growing areas. In particular, Marco Bindi, that is our coordinator, is going to contact, has already contacted Spain, France, Germany, in order to share data and methods with other groups working in other countries and on other vineyards. We have also the possibility to validate and calibrate models for tree or shrub species, also considering the quality of the product, not only the quantity, the crop aspects. So if we understand the vineyard system, we can also make simulation for future scenarios under climate change conditions. This is an idea to apply, mature, to perhaps a new frontier to consider also mature other species, not annual species, but perennial trees. Okay, thank you. So,
thank you, Federico. So pleasure to see a study of model development based on sound with experimental work. So, and questions? Somebody, you are hungry? Well,
perhaps it's all clear. Everything's clear.
yes. Could you tell us a little bit more about how you are planning to introduce in your modeling framework the climate change effect? CO2.
This is a challenge. This is we know that with the climate change effects, there could be lots of influences on climate change effects on the management of vineyards. If we understand the engine of this car, we can try to put in this in this engine we could try to make simulations in the future parameters of the climate to understand, in order to understand where how grape can adapt to this climate change, because grapevines has lots of possibilities to adapt to climate variability, and we will try to put future scenarios in this engine, in this car, and so we can try to do how wine can answer to this variation, to this oscillation, because the trend is important, but the trend is only one element. We have very high variability in our territory, in our landscape, in our vineyards, between one year to another. And so climate change could be an aspect, but we have to deal with the extreme events, with the opposite events, opposite year trends, and so wine growers have to know to adapt their vineyard management. This is, in this moment, the most important thing to do for wine growers, not perhaps long-term trends.
Actual and future.
Actual and future, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Anybody else? So thank you for attending this session, and please, the authors of posters could be made here for a while to organize the poster session, and that's all. Thank you, everybody.